All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of UX Pathways. I have the honor of being joined by Debbie Levitt. Debbie, how's it going?
Hi.
Whoa, look at that confetti.
Hi, everybody. I'm well. How are you? I hope everyone is being safe and healthy.
Yeah, me too. I am so happy to have you on the podcast today because I know you've had an interesting journey when it comes to CX and UX. But let's back up just for one moment. Love to understand your role and what you're currently doing right now.
Yeah, sure. As of when we're recording this, because who can say what happens tomorrow? But I run my own CX and UX agency and consultancy. It's called DeltaCX, like the name of everything else that I do. And basically, I've been doing this for over 25 years, and we do strategy and projects and all areas of CX and UX for our clients. And so I kind of run my own business, and so I can give myself whatever title I want. Usually I use CXO, Chief Experience Officer. Usually if I'm freelancing or contracting at somebody else's company, I'm typically lead UX architect or lead UX researcher. But certainly in my own world, I am the queen of my own world, and that is what I'm doing. I have been interviewing for some jobs because I'm trying to get into leadership at other companies because I want to take the models and ideas that I have and put them into play at other companies outside of my own. So maybe by the time people are listening to this, I do my agency and I'm working somewhere else. Who can say?
That's amazing. Well, best of luck to you in your
Thank you.
journey. And that is my cheesy segue into my next question, which is, so I wondered, how did you stumble into the CX UX industry?
Stumble in for sure. So, growing up, I was always a computer geek. Now, that doesn't sound very special today. You know, everyone's on computers and phones, but I was born in 1972. So, being a technology and math and science person in the 70s, especially as a woman, was a little bit out of the ordinary. I was first put on a computer in 1979, and I got my first computer in 1985. And so so while we all think of ourselves as computer people now, when I was growing up, that was weird. You know, everyone was playing dolls and pretending they were a nurse or a teacher, and I was on computers and pretended I had my own company. So, and look at me today. So when I was in university, I went to Tufts University, and I was double majoring in pre-med and music, because I was entering college in 1989. You know, people have to realize that's before smartphones. It was really around the time when many people were just starting to get their first computers. You know, the mid 80s into the late 80s, people were just starting to get their Commodore 64s and early Macs and IBMs and things like that. So I finished with a degree in music, which I'm very proud of. I can always tell when someone on LinkedIn is mad at me because they check my profile and they go, "Well, you have a degree in music." And I go, "Ah, I see. They ran out of ideas." So I'm very proud of my degree in music. And after I dumped the pre-med, I took a bunch of psychology classes for fun because, man, I had a hole in my schedule. And that's really what ended up influencing me later the most. So in 1995, I was working in the music business in New York City, and a friend of mine said, "You've got to see this thing called the web, and you can make pages for it." And I was like, "Oh, this sounds up my alley." Now, keep in mind, I'm not an artist, but I'm a geek. And so I think I stayed awake for a week teaching myself HTML. And then I said, I think people will pay people who know how to make these pages. So I started a kind of an online strategy and web design company. And I found someone who was an artist and actually did some coding. And between the two of us, we started making websites in 1995. And it was only some years later that I learned about UX. But when I started making websites in the 90s, I said, I want to make these things based on what I learned in psychology classes. I want to make these things based on how people parse information and perceive different things. Now, I wasn't doing research and testing like we're supposed to do, but I had these early ideas that, this is supposed to be user-centered and focus on how people will perceive this and what they need from the websites. So that's where I started, and I know it's not something that can be replicated today. It's not like, oh, I've never heard of UX. Then I went to school X, and here I am. And so I don't have a traditional way in, and I'm so old that it's not a way in that people are going to replicate. Though there are still some people who come in through web design. Like my boyfriend has his own WordPress business, and he always wanted to get into UX. And of course, now working with me, he is getting into UX, and he came from web design and 20 years of kitchen and home design. So, certainly to me, it's like, however you get into UX almost isn't important anymore. To me, what's really important is what you're learning, how you're learning it, and who you're learning it from, because there's a lot of low quality education out there. And that's what I'm worried about. So however you want to get into UX, get into UX. But, let's take a little extra time and make sure it's right for you. Because I was going to be a genetic researcher until a mentor kind of talked me out of it. And to me, that's the best mentor. The best mentor is the one who really sees you and says, you know what? I don't think this is right for you. I think there's something else out there for you. And if that guy hadn't done that, who knows where I would be today? Probably not doing this.
Yeah, that's amazing. Debbie, I think we're celestial beings here because I had a very similar journey, and it is amazing to hear. I mean, exactly. I mean, nowadays it's tough to replicate that, but it is interesting how, like you said, you may come from a non-traditional background and you may be interested in getting into this field. And I think it is helpful to understand and have those mentors tell you those things, because it leads you down paths that it seems is exactly where you landed here. You're able to use your background to make a product that can help someone. And I think a lot of people want to get into this practice because they want to help others. What type of advice, you started going down the advice path of, if I am interested and I want to go down this path, is it solely about that educational path where you need to go? I know you started hinting on that.
Yeah, I think ultimately you do need education. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a university degree, but it does mean you have to learn stuff. The UX is about knowing stuff, and it's about knowing the right stuff and being able to do the stuff. And so the question is, who can teach you the stuff? And that's where you have to put on your critical thinking hat, because there's lots of promises out there being made by lots of different boot camps and video courses and other people, and if you really have UX running through your blood, then you start by UXing your own journey. Start by researching the heck out of anybody you think you're going to learn from. First, check them on LinkedIn. What have they been doing? If they are not doing the work, you don't want to learn from them. If they haven't done the work in 10 years, you don't want to learn from them. If they were a UI designer or a front-end developer or a creative director, but you're supposed to be learning UX from them, you don't want to learn UX from them. That's not what they've been doing. They've been in design, but not UX research and design. So first of all, put on that UX hat and research your own journey, and don't settle for anything less than a quality educational experience. I can't tell you enough stories about the people who come to me, like privately on LinkedIn, and say, hey, I took this Udemy course 2 years ago, or hey, I went to this boot camp a year ago, and check out my portfolio. And I say, I'm sorry, but it looks like your portfolio makes it look like you are not ready for a job. And they'll be like, well, what do you mean? I took the courses, I did the assignments, the boot camp said I was great. And I say, let's talk about my phases of proficiency model. When UX is treated as building blocks, everybody is great. The building blocks are tools, Figma, Sketch. The building blocks are the lowest level of stuff. I spoke to people, I interviewed a person. I ran a survey. Yeah, but did you do these well? Or did you just do them? Science and technique says, I did these with science and technique. I understand psychology and human behavior. I understand the foundations of UX principles. I understand these things, and now I'm applying them. And I'm applying them in an environment where an expert can look at my work and go, you got that right, but I don't think you got that quite right. Let's take another look at that. If you are just getting rah, 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 you did a great job, you're going to find a job, that is cheerleading, and that is not, you're not skilling up. And of course, that's the upside down version. And that, of course, at the top is strategy. But I don't expect people to be strategic about UX work or projects until they're about 5 years in. So you are trying to make sure you don't end up in building blocks land, which is, well, I took a persona template and I filled in something I think I know about people. That's extremely common. You can face palm, but that's extremely common. And those people are sure they've done it right. I'm sure you have someone watching this right now going, that's not how you make a persona. Newsflash, it's not how you make a persona. But if you watch enough Udemy videos and YouTubers and bootcamp stuff, you think that if you just grab these templates and fill them out with our best guesses, we're doing the UX, and we're not. Those are building blocks. And so these are the things that I warn people about, and it really takes the critical thinking that we have to put into our jobs every day. Our jobs are high critical thinking, high deductive reasoning, high logic, high problem finding and problem solving. If you are not putting that into your own educational process, no offense, I don't know you, listener, dear listener, UX might not be for you. I can't turn my critical thinking off. I can't turn some of my skepticism off. I can't turn these things off. And if you have to turn them on, this may or may not be for you for a variety of reasons. And that's okay. Better to find that now. Like I did with genetic research. I'm grateful that someone helped me realize when I was 19 that it was not the right career path. But even if you're just figuring it out now and you're older than me, younger than me, it's still important. So research what people are teaching, because real UX work isn't Figma and wireframes. There's so much more to UX work. Research who's teaching it. Who are your tutors? Who are your teaching assistants? I find that almost always, especially at a boot camp, these people are just graduated the boot camp themselves, and now they're going to teach you. What? There's a reason you didn't get piano lessons from the person who started piano lessons 3 months ago. Doesn't make sense. That's why critical thinking would help us ask the right questions. Like, why is that teaching assistant 3 months ahead of my UX career? Wait, I want to learn from experts. Where are the experts? So these are the questions to ask. We've done a bunch of episodes about this on my DeltaCX YouTube channel. We've done 2 episodes, and I have a whole slide on all the criteria that I go through when I look at education. And the problem is right now, there's no education that I recommend. It all seems to be pretty much garbage. I'll be working next year on inventing my own thing because I'm tired of waiting. And it's all garbage. And then even if you find some decent knowledge, they show you inputs and they show you outputs, and you're supposed to guess how they got from A to B, right? I'm sure even in your master's degree, Mark, I'm sure somebody said like, hey, sometimes we do research, and hey, sometimes we write a report at the end of it. Pretend you did research, now write a report. Well, hold on. Thing 1, what does that report look like? Thing 2, show me how you write a report. How'd you get there? How'd you get from this to this? Nobody's doing that. I haven't found it yet. So I started doing it on my YouTube channel. I'm now doing live streams where I'm doing work live and I'm thinking out loud and I'm explaining what I'm doing and I'm taking questions. So the problem is, even when you find some decent knowledge out there, people are acting like, well, you just interview people and you make personas. Well, what just happened in between? Nobody's telling anybody. It is cray cray. And then they're charging you how many thousands of dollars for this?
Debbie, I wish I had a video control panel just like you, because I
Oh,
would be
thank you.
sending the preach
I
right
don't
back
have
at
that.
you. And
Yeah.
you definitely hit on some key points. I loved how you talked about the pyramid and how you work your way through that. I think that's critical when you're just getting into anything, and especially this field where there's so much nuance. And when you're trying to, some of these products is life or death that you're creating.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people
Sure.
say, oh, it isn't, rocket science. Is like, well, so I think everything you outline is great advice for anyone that's thinking of getting into the industry. And I love the fact that you notated that it is helpful to tell someone this may not be for you. And that is something that I think a lot of us need to hear.
Yeah, because ultimately we did a show, I think it was last year, and on my DeltaCX channel, we was called Finding Your Life Purpose. And I brought in my life and business coach, and she did an exercise live, which you can follow along with the video and do it. And it's like, why are you here? And there's a reason. There's a reason for you to be here, and there's at least one good job out there for you, but it may or may not be CX or UX. And there are so many things that go into CX or UX. And then on top of that, as Mark can probably tell you, many of our jobs are full of conflict and disagreement. And we're not always the most well-loved people in the room. But yet you watch all these YouTubers and they go, let me show you my totally cool real life job. And then it's just like, today I worked out in the free gym, and then I ate the free food, and then I played ping pong, and then I put a sticky note on the wall. And I'm like, that doesn't look like any job I've ever seen anywhere. And I worked in Silicon Valley. And that had nothing to do with the job. I think that was just a tour of free food. So I think people are getting
Right.
sucked in by some of these videos that are acting like a day in the life of a UXer is just totally awesome free food. And they totally forget the parts where people fight with us constantly. I love telling the story about the 2-week long fight I was once in at a job because I thought shoe sizes should be shown in number order, like 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5. And the person I was fighting against thought that the shoe sizes should be ordered by how much inventory we had in that size. So the shoe size with the most inventory would go first. So that would end up, 11, 6.5, 9, 10.5, 4. Like that would be the number. And it would change every time you loaded up the page because our inventory would change. She thought that would help people buy more shoes because they would see there was more inventory. And I was like, hey, guess what? No matter how much inventory you have, I'm a size 9.5. Like, doesn't matter. You might as well show me numbers in number order so I can
Right.
find them. That was a 2-week fight.
It's the old model, the UX is, and I saw your presentation a week ago or so on World Usability Day, and I remember seeing this, but it's the business technical, and then surprise, the user needs. So, those all things need to be balanced. And well, Debbie, I feel as though I've walked away with some great feeling of excitement for those that are trying to get into this space. And I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me and asking the questions. And if people have more questions, you can find me on anything that says DeltaCX or over on LinkedIn. Thanks again,
It's a
Mark.
pleasure. Thank you.